Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Dog Classroom Podcast. I'm Amelia.
And I'm Anne-Marie.
And today we're going to talk about different ways to get behaviors from our dogs.
Right. So we're going to go really trainy, techie.
We're going to get a little bit nerdy today, but we're going to keep it fun. We're going to keep it light. It's going to be great. So I think we should just jump right in and talk about the different ways to get behaviors, just general overview.
Okay.
And then dive into each of them individually. Because there's 3 that we want to talk about today specifically.
Which are used very regularly in training.
Right. So I think the first one that everybody is going to be somewhat familiar with is luring.
Right.
So when we say luring in regards to dog training, we mean teaching the dog to follow what we consider a lure or a little piece of food in our hand and using that to get a behavior from the dog. Okay, brief overview. We'll go more into that. Shaping, which is a little bit more of setting up the environment to get what you want from the dog, setting up a scenario so that they are likely to offer you.
Right, and allowing their thinking more for the steps. What we're doing is rewarding behaviors they're offering instead of actually cueing them.
Right, so we're doing like little steps toward something else.
Which takes a little bit longer, but as far as I'm concerned, when we shape a behavior, they really understand it. It sticks.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And then I think the last one we're going to talk about for today is going to be capturing.
Right.
Which a lot of people don't really know about.
I was going to say isn't used as much.
But I love it for focus work. And I think for a lot of small dogs, actually, we've talked about it for getting a down. So capturing is waiting for the dog to just do the thing that you like.
Yeah.
And then marking it. So we'll talk about markers a little bit too.
Right.
And then because we're marking that behavior and we're rewarding it, they are more likely to offer it to us again.
Okay.
So, let's start with luring.
Okay.
And I would like to just kind of go over what it is and when we are likely to use it.
Okay. So like Amelia did a little bit, or did mention when we were sort of describing all the 3 different ones is, I guess when we're introducing like sits and downs and stuff in class, we are using a lure. Why do we use a lure? I would say because we get the behavior a little bit quicker. Right. And not to say people need to see success right away in order to continue, but it is a thing.
Yes.
So the tricky thing about luring, honestly, though, is it can be overdone as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Where does the dog truly understand the behavior if there's always a treat in their nose or in front of their face?
Well, and I think that's why it has to be done correctly.
Right.
Which we will talk about as well. But the idea is we can teach them the treat in my hand in this, like I just teach between 2 fingers in this sort of form means I want you to follow it. And maybe Maui will do it a little bit for you.
So again, honestly, a simple sit, he's already going to do it here, is I have the treat here. I just lift it up. He follows it.
Right, because we've taught him to sort of move his head to where the treat is going.
Right, so he can follow it. And then the same thing with the down, or he's following it there.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So when we're using luring, there's benefits. It's quick, like you said. It shows success really quickly, which when we're teaching, people want to see results, right? And so we're going to give them the thing that's going to be the best and the easiest for them to use, even if it's, that we wouldn't necessarily lure something in that situation.
Right. But the understanding is we're using the lure repetition multiple times. We're doing it multiple times, but there's a fading part.
Right. So
where we're actually going to get rid of it.
Let's go to just some of the downsides of luring first.
Okay.
Because like you're saying is it gets overdone and then you're reliant on it because the cookie has become part of the cue.
Yes.
And I will test that.
Only do it if the cookie is there.
I'll test that in puppy classes sometimes because everybody likes to say, my week-old puppy is so good, they know sit and down and shake paw. And I'm like, okay, do it without a cookie then. They don't know it.
Right.
They can lure it, but they don't actually know the behavior. And that's what you're saying is, do they understand? Are they learning what we think they're learning because we're just showing them around with a cookie?
Right.
So there are downsides that way. There's also downsides in the way that people can use it inappropriately.
Okay.
So let's talk reactive dogs a little bit.
Okay. That's where
Fearful
you're going.
dogs
I
a
was
little
waiting
bit.
to see where you were going. Okay.
is because if the dog knows how to follow a lure, you're like, here, come see this person. This person's nice. I like them. Or the person has a treat and they say, hey, come here, puppy. And they lure the dog in with the treat.
Yeah.
Then the treat's gone. And then what happens? Either we jump back.
The dog is stuck in that position or stuck close
or
to
we
that
bite.
person. Yeah. Or we lunge at where we are. Yeah.
Or the next time that you try to lure something, they say, no way, I don't trust you. Because you've lured them into a situation that wasn't safe in their mind.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's definitely downsides to using it that way.
Yeah.
And then there's also the downsides of, the dog maybe not necessarily learning what we think they're learning. So how can we prevent those? Is number one, don't lure your dog into situations.
Right.
So if your dog is scared of something, if your dog is worried about something, you're going to maybe use shaping, you're going to maybe do something else.
Or capturing, maybe. We'll revisit that when we talk about capturing. Yeah.
You're probably not going to use luring in a situation where you want the dog to do something that they don't necessarily want to do.
Right.
Getting into the bathtub, going to see the scary stranger.
Correct.
Going up to another dog's bum.
Yeah.
All those things that we don't necessarily want to use luring for.
Right.
And then the one where, we can prevent it from being used incorrectly just because the dog's not learning it the way we think they're learning it, is to fade the lure.
Yes.
So,
okay.
With the fading the lure, obviously Maui doesn't need a lure to sit, but we can show it just to...
Right. You know what I thought a good one might be is the crawl.
Okay.
So let me just see. How about you narrate me?
Okay. So to lure a crawl, you're going to need a cookie in your hand. We're going to need either a long one or multiple cookies. And we're going to get him into the down first and then take the treat and sort of lure his nose down and forward. Yeah. And then as he's doing that, you're either letting him have another nibble or releasing another treat. And so as he's sort of crawling his little body across the floor here, he's following the lure. So if we wanted to fade the lure for that, we would
I'm going to just reset.
Yeah, we're going to reset, but we would still be rewarding the behavior. When we fade the lure, we're not saying never give them a treat again. We're just saying do it differently. So now you're using an empty hand to do the same motion that you were doing. Empty hand and then transferring in the treat. So the treat comes after they've done the behavior. There you go. So empty hand and then transferring in the treat.
Perfect.
And I think with that, and it's cute because it's crawl and it's low pressure, it's a fun trick.
Right.
But people get really stuck on using the lure when it's something that they deem as important, like a sit or a down or whatever.
Right. But I think the part that they're missing is the fading part, where you don't want to like overdo the lure. Because to me, any dog doesn't need it for weeks on end. You need it to introduce a behavior, and then you have to start to fade it. But the other extreme is then people just stop feeding.
Exactly.
Like there has to be like a gradual decline of using that lure. So you saw, again, all I did was get just a head move and then I treated it. So that's what we're calling is transfer. So once you're done using the lure, you're still going to transfer treats quickly. Mm-hmm. And then eventually I'm going to ask for multiple steps for one treat.
And then with the hand signals too, like this is how we get a hand signal in a lot of situations.
Because people are like, what is my hand signal?
Yeah, and I'm like, what are you doing?
Right, and the hand signal is the same whether you have the lure in your hand or not. That's the actual
And I actually really like the down for this one because when we start with a lure with down, we have the treat in our hand and we're like going all the way down and we're basically touching the floor.
Right.
And so what I say to people is like, do you want to be touching the floor when you go out places? Do you want to touch the ground at camp when, do you want to put your hand on that floor? Probably not. So you want to turn that into a hand signal sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
And what tends to happen is we get, we can fade the lure to the point where we're still touching the ground, but we don't take it any further than that. We don't take it to, okay, now I'm going to just point only as far as I need to. And then we lessen that until the point where we're standing up. There. Yeah. So you don't have to touch the floor. And I know just for studio purposes, we're not standing up, but if you were to be standing up and you had a small dog, that's going to be a longer process of fading the lure because they're little. Yeah. So when we're doing that, we have to take the individual dog into consideration too. Yeah. Because I'll see people go from, okay, I lured it, and then they want to do like the arm up for down.
Like this.
Yes. And I'm like, we're not doing that because that is not where he's at yet. We can make that. Lots of people like
we
their
can
arm
add
up
different
or down.
signals, and we're not even going to talk about verbal training today.
No.
But again, that can be all added on. Like, we're just trying to say there's a pattern, there's a process on how they learn, and we're trying to have the owners as well as the dog be positive, like have successes along the way. Because if you have successes, you're going to keep doing it and you're going to keep building.
Exactly. Yeah. So you can totally use luring for a lot of different things, and it can be successful. You just have to do it properly so that you don't get stuck.
Right.
And that the dog is actually learning what you think they are. If they can't do it without seeing the treat, then all they're doing is going, okay, cookie means sit.
Right.
And that's what I see a lot in puppy school with the 8-week-old puppies is they think they're listening to the verbal cue sit, but it's actually not until they reach into the pocket or not until they bring the cookie
because
up.
I always say they will always divert to the hand signal first because that's what they understand the best.
Yeah, so we do luring, then we do fading the lure, then hand signal, then verbal, if we're going to use that method.
Next.
Okay, so moving on to shaping.
You're on a roll. Let's go.
I'm on a roll because
go.
I just think like there's so much more to dog training than luring dogs into different positions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I really like shaping, and that's why I say like, yes, in classes, we're going to give you the fastest, we're going to give you the easiest, we're going to give you when you're, what you need to see success. And then as we get into more advanced classes, then we use these different methods where...
because you are cueing or asking for more advanced behaviors. Because to me, a sit and a down and a stand are not advanced behaviors.
Yeah, you don't need to shape them necessarily.
No, but what they are is a precursor to other things you can build on. There's things, right? Like you need the staples, you need the primary parts to be ordered to build on.
Need the foundation.
Foundation, thank you. All right, here we go. She's building a home,
to
everybody.
build the bricks
all right.
and whatever. Anyway, so when we're shaping, one of the things actually we were just talking about with shaping is like you and I would shape go to mat entirely.
Yeah.
We would not lure.
No.
We wouldn't, but we just talked about go to mat and we did do a little bit
So to summarize one word, I'm just thinking of it here for a sec. Shaping is allowing the dog to think or build through the process. Okay, go.
Okay, so I think technically the definition of shaping is successive approximations toward...
I knew something techie or scientific was going to come.
So tiny little slices of behavior.
Yeah.
That are eventually going to become a big behavior.
Right, but we're allowing the dog to almost offer them and we're marking it all the way through. So now you're going to talk about a reward marker.
Okay, so we will usually use a verbal marker, like a yes. Mine is yes. That's just what comes out of my mouth. If you're going to use a marker, you're telling the dog that's the exact behavior, that's the exact second that you're doing the thing that I wanted. So if it's a sit, for example, the second their bum touches the ground, that's when we're going to say yes. And we're going to mark it with the yes and then reward it with a treat. So it's almost like a little bridge, like it buys us a second to say, that was what we liked, here's the treat for that. So stick with me. You can do it. Yes, he's targeting the hand, and then he's getting the treat for it. Yes, there we go. He targets the hand, he gets the treat for it. So he's doing the thing first, but in shaping, you're setting up the environment so that they're going to get it right. So you're putting your hand 2 inches from his face. Of course, he's going to lean forward and see what's going on. Yeah. So you're just going to mark that behavior. You're not luring him towards your hand.
But I was going to say, I don't have a treat in my hand.
No.
Right.
So if we go back to go to mat for a second, we would set up the environment by saying, okay, here's a mat. And then they're like, okay.
Yeah, we would mark what they're going to do with it.
We would mark looking at the mat. We would mark stepping on the mat. We would mark offering a sit on the mat. Because as you get closer to what you want, you increase your criteria. So we start with, you looked at the mat and that got you a yes. And we'll do that a few times to build the confidence and go, yep, you're on the right track. Then we're going to go, okay, I'm going to stare at the mat and see what happens. And maybe they take a little step onto it. And then we mark that. And that's our new criteria. So we want you to step on the mat. And then all the paws on the mat. And then sitting, because we're waiting. And we're just going, okay, what else do you have?
Right.
They're sitting on the mat. They're laying down on the mat because they want to get comfy. We're marking that. We're rewarding that.
Yeah.
And then we're sort of shaping toward our end behavior, which is go to the mat, lay down, stay there until you're released. The nice thing about shaping is that, like you said, the dog is thinking. And so we get a behavior that really sticks because they've done it. We haven't shown them, here's a lure and this is what we're doing.
Yeah, and I think it's
They've
good.
had to
It's
come up with it.
prime for mental stimulation.
Exactly.
More dogs need to think.
Yeah. So here's another example. When we're in agility class, week 1, we put the jumps in front of everybody and they want to lure the dog over it. And I'm like, okay, in agility, your dog needs to be independent. You cannot be at the jump luring them over in, our end goal.
Right.
So I don't like to start jumps with luring. Could you? Sure. I don't want to. I'm going to sit the dog in front of the jump and I'm going to wait for them to even just look at the jump. And then I'm going to use the placement of my reward to encourage the behavior that I want. So instead of maybe delivering them the treat, I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to toss the treat and tell them to find it.
Yeah, so
And
you're
I'm
going to do it at a
toss it.
little bit of a distance.
So if they're going over toward the jump, I'm saying, yes, I want you to actually come closer to the jump, and that's where I'm placing my reward. I'm not going to place my reward somewhere that's going to set them up to fail. So I'm not going to put the jumps and put the bar really high and then put the treat on the other side of the jump and be like, hope you get it right.
Right.
I'm going to make it so that he does get it right.
But
And
it's
that's the
like
thing
you're
with
doing
shaping.
it a step at a time. You're not doing like one thing here and then something way over there. You're doing little increments and rewarding them. So the dog's like, okay, if I do this, I get the treat and I get the treat here. Okay, so if I do this again or I do it a little further, and it's just, building.
So why don't we talk about some downsides of shaping? There are some.
There are some. Downsides of shaping is it may take longer.
It may
takes
take longer.
patience on both parts.
It can be frustrating for a dog who is not used to that sort of thing.
Right. Crossover. Yeah.
So when we, for example, in branching out the first week when we do 101 things to do with a box, the humans are like, what do we want them to do with the box?
No.
And then I'm saying, I don't care. I just tell them.
Right, yeah. And they want a specific task.
Yeah.
Instead, we're like, put the box there and reward the dog doing something.
Yeah. So we're trying to build the
absolutely.
foundations for the dog to get it right, get it right, get it right, get it right.
Yeah.
So that they want to offer us behaviors, because some dogs are scared to offer behaviors because they've been punished for certain things.
Yeah.
Or maybe just a fearful dog in general that we're trying to shape, go into the car.
Yeah.
And they're thinking, wow, that's really, really scary. We're going to have to break that down so much more for that dog. But again, I think it still has its advantages because
It takes time, though.
It takes time.
Yeah.
But
in the long run, it's absolutely worth it.
it's going to be worth it. That's the thing. So it has its upsides. It has a little bit of downsides. The other thing is it does take some human skills.
Yeah.
You need to-
marking skills. Yep.
You need to have good
Recognize,
timing.
observation, body language. You need to be
Yes.
able to see.
You need to be able to visualize and mark and reward the second where the dog looks at the jump or the second where the dog does the thing that you want.
Yeah.
And not everybody has, the mechanical skills for that.
Yeah.
So sometimes, there's ways that you can work on that as a human. And then also knowing when to make things harder and when to make things a little
Right,
easier.
because you don't want them both to get frustrated and the other thing I think just to throw in there is you're not usually with shaping, your training sessions might be 3 to 4 minutes.
Maybe.
You may not get the end behavior. More than likely,
Right.
you will not get the end behavior in that session. So don't think, okay, by this certain day or this certain time, I need this behavior. You're going to go with the flow and let the dog dictate how quickly you're going to go and how quickly they're going to learn, and be prepared for multiple sessions.
Exactly, yeah. So with shaping, you need a little bit more of a plan. You need a little bit more of a thought out strategy, whereas luring, you're just moving the dog around.
Yeah. Okay. You need to switch to capturing now there, lady.
We're going to capturing.
Yeah.
Okay. Capturing is literally just waiting for the dog to do the behavior that they want, that you want, and then marking it.
Yeah.
So again, using the example of down, if you have a dog who is just very hesitant to lay down on cue, they're fearful, they're nervous, they're whatever, every dog is going to lay down at some point.
Right.
Right? So you're going to put yourself in the living room. You're going to have some treats ready to go. You're going to be just watching at a distance. And if they lay down, it's going to be yes and throwing a treat to them.
Yeah.
Another one that I really like for our capturing skills is attention, because everybody wants to take the treat, lure the dog,
Yeah,
put the cookie on
Yeah.
their face and say, watch me. And that's how we did it 25 years ago. But I have now had however many years of using capturing and getting way better focus because the dog is learning to offer it.
Yeah.
They're going, hey, if I do this and I just turn my head and I look at you, you're marking it and you're rewarding it. So I always tell people when you're out walking with your dog, check-ins, if they just
casually look at you, or all of a
Yes.
sudden are walking beside you.
Exactly. So capturing again for heel.
Yeah.
Could we lure heeling and leash walking? We could, but nobody wants to walk with their back, all twisted and whatever.
But I think at that point, you're influencing the dog's decision, where when you're using capturing, you're allowing the dog to make the decision.
True.
Right?
Yes.
And to me, that's how you build relationship. If it's always, and if you're always sticking the treat in there like me, you want the dog to choose to go, okay, I'm going to look away from this smell or this environment and check in with you. And I think it's a huge relationship building.
Yeah, I love check-ins. I think they're awesome.
Yeah.
And that's something that I do a ton of capturing for. I think obviously downsides of capturing is you wait for the dog to do the behavior. So if we're going to try to capture, let's say, I was going to say sit pretty, but Tulip does it all the time.
Yeah, she does.
Like something that the dog doesn't naturally offer. If we're going to try to capture, I don't know, spin, and the dog isn't a dog who spins.
Yeah.
It's never going to happen, right?
Yeah, because how often are they going to do that in regular life, like
Exactly.
everyday life, right?
So it has to be reasonable for that individual dog.
Yeah.
I think like the things that most dogs are going to do, sitting, laying down, that sort of thing, we can definitely use capturing. But again, it's going to be slow because you're not cueing anything. You're waiting for the dog to offer that behavior.
Yeah.
But
I think it helps a lot of time not to go into sort of a whole nother podcast, which is like arousal and emotional. And sometimes, and I know just the reactive dog conferences and stuff, like some trainers and clients are even just going from the dog being able to
yes,
just
capturing,
breathing, take a breath, or actually laying down. And I think a lot of times where I would say I use capturing, and now when I think back, I have to say, he's backing away, that I've sort of forgot about the word, but anytime they're offering calm behavior is technically you're capturing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then as far as when you're saying that, like look at that, like some of the reactive dog skills, like you're not pointing at them and luring them over to a dog and saying, hey, go look at the dog. You're waiting for them to glance at the dog, and then you're capturing that and going, yes, I like that behavior.
Yeah.
So definitely lots of different sort of things that we can do to get
But I think a
behaviors.
lot of times people don't realize that they're actually doing some of these different, well, we know they're doing luring. I think it's pretty straightforward, but the other one, shaping and capturing, I think a lot of people are doing them, but not actually realizing there's a term for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think with capturing, again, downside is your timing has to be great.
Yeah.
Because you could capture the wrong thing.
Yes. Yeah.
So when we're talking about barking, for example, and I'm like, you need to wait for quiet. If you are 1 second off, you have just clicked or rewarded or marked that dog for barking.
Yeah.
So you have to be prepared again. You have to have really good timing, and your treat delivery has to be great.
Yeah.
So there are some downsides to it. It does take some skills. And I mean, that's why we're here. We teach people skills. So.
But I think it's having multiple methods, and I think different behaviors work for different methods, and I think different methods work for different types of people.
Exactly.
Right? Because we don't all learn the same. Dogs don't all learn the same. So it's just about us educating you for you guys to have, they call it a toolbox, like a larger toolbox for you to be able to work and build with your dog for different skills. Because I find a lot more people in classes are wanting to do more things.
Yeah.
Right? Which is super fun for us. So how do they accomplish those more things? Right? And it's about introducing these different types. I think B left. Introducing these new sort of skills and having to successfully execute them.
Right, because just like we were saying in the beginning, people want to see success. So if we tried in, week 1 of like puppy school to be like, we're going to capture this behavior.
Yeah.
nobody would want to come back. That would be very frustrating.
Yeah.
The dogs would be frustrated. The people would be frustrated. And that's the other thing with some of these is the dog can get frustrated. And then it becomes, a little bit less fun for both of us if the dog isn't getting it right.
Right. But again, for any of these, it's multiple repetitions, it's multiple sessions, it's a learning curve for both. And even though we've used these different methods multiple times, every dog is a new experience. Every trick or behavior is a new experience. And it's just having the knowledge to sort of figure it out. But honestly, that's where we feel we come into play.
Yeah. And so I guess the takeaway from the episode was just that we wanted people to know that there's different ways to get behaviors.
Yeah.
It's not all luring.
Yep.
If you like luring, amazing. Just do it correctly.
Yeah.
And if you're not sure how to do that, we can help with that.
Yeah.
So why don't we summarize a little bit? We talked about luring, shaping, capturing.
Right.
With our luring, we're talking about following food. We're talking about moving the dog into positions by using the food.
Yeah.
We talked about shaping, which is the little slices toward the end behavior.
Yeah, building on the behavior, baby steps.
And then we talked about capturing, which is waiting for the dog to do a behavior, marking it, rewarding it.
Yeah.
Are there other ways to get behavior? Absolutely.
But those are the three
the main ones.
well-known basic ones. And I think it's a good little introduction to, I don't want to say advanced training, but another step to training. And then once you sort of have those, and then we build on those. And I think it's important for people to understand the building process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's a good spot to end.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you guys for tuning in. You can find us on our website at thedogclassroom.com and on social media at The Dog Classroom.
Thank you.